Abe and Sarah have been happily married for more than 60 years. They share children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they just love each other so much, and they love doing favors for one another. That's how they get to more than 60 years. And one fine day, Sarah says to Abe, "Abe, I'm really in the mood for a banana split. Would you mind going to J.P. Lick's to get me one?" And he says, "Sarah, I would love that. What kind of a banana split would you like?" And Sarah says to Abe, "Abe, write this down, because a banana split has a lot going on. I want a banana split. I want 3 flavors. Write it down. I want chocolate chip, Oreo, and cake batter. And also, tell them, please, that I want a lot of whipped cream. I love J.P. Lick's whipped cream. And also, by the way, I love their hot fudge. A lot of hot fudge. And then with the cherry on top. But Abe, write it down." "I don't need to write it down. It's in here. I've got it." Off he goes. He comes back a half an hour later. He's grinning ear to ear. "Sarah, I got you exactly what you want. I told you I would. I got you 12 piping hot, fresh bagels with plain cream cheese just like you like it." "Abe, I told you, write it down. I told you you'd forget if you didn't write it down. I don't want plain cream cheese. I want cream cheese with scallions." Now, this is an old joke. My late father-in-law used to tell it. And when I first heard it years ago, I laughed. But the older I get, the more I realize this joke is no joke. This joke has a lot of pathos to it. There's the pathos that Abe is not the person that he was. There is the pathos that Sarah is not the person that she was. There is the pathos that their problem does not have a simple answer and may not have a happy solution. There is the pathos that as the years go on, it's going to take more and more time of their kids and grandkids and caregivers to get them through the day safely. And there is the pathos that as the years go on, changes are coming and they're not going to like them. So Abe and Sarah have this 60-plus year love affair. And it's just so rich and it's just so complex because it's full of good stuff. It's full of a lot of love, a lot of joy, a lot of shared history, and a lot of relationships that really matter. And it's filled with loss and pain, more to come. And it's all wrapped up, and it's all real, and it's all there. How do we make sense of the totality of Abe and Sarah's life? And how do we make sense of the totality of our life? How do we make sense not only of the good times, but of the rough patches? And we, the Jewish people, are in the middle now of one fierce, rough patch. This morning I want to talk about 2 energy fields that at first blush seem like they have nothing to do with each other, but they're deeply connected. One is an incredible, positive energy field, and that is you. You and your relationships with this temple. All of us, and particularly those who celebrated their bar or bat mitzvah here, so many years ago and are still here and still love Torah and the community and one another. Incredible positive energy. And the other is the incredible negative energy, the incredible ugliness, the incredible scariness of what is happening on college campuses today in terms of Jew hate and Israel hate. Let's take the lovely one first, synagogue membership. Both of these, by the way, have cycles, and we're going to see both of them have ups and downs and periods of closeness and periods of far away. Synagogue membership. If you are a longtime member of any synagogue, and if you're a longtime member of Temple Emmanuel, it is almost inevitable that there are cycles. There are periods when you are closer, and there are periods when you're farther away. Our young families with the youngest learners, they're close. They're bringing those very cutie pie little kids to our model seders and to our Purim carnivals and to our Shabbat Alive gatherings and Taste of Shabbat and all the wonderful classes. Our B'nai Mitzvah families, they're close. First of all, they're on the circuit. They're going to another bar bat mitzvah every Shabbos. And they're coming here because they want to prepare their son or their daughter for the big day and to get into space. They're coming. They're Shabbat morning regulars. Our empty nesters are close. They wake up and realize, hey, there's no more kids to carpool. And we can now spend time on finding meaning ourselves, and they often come here. Our seniors, they don't retire, they rewire. And part of their rewiring is to find a spiritual meaning. And they come and they're open. They're closer. And then we have our families who are in a different chapter. They're building their career. They're building their medical practice. They're building their legal practice. They're trying to get tenure. They're starting out. They got kids here, there, everywhere. They're juggling and feeling like they're dropping balls, and they're a little bit farther away for the moment. Cycles of closer, cycles of farther away. It's real. And then there is what's happening on college campuses. You don't need me to tell you what's happening and how scary it is, and how it's spreading from the East Coast, Columbia and Yale and Harvard and Emerson and Northeastern, to the West Coast, to USC, to places that I thought we wouldn't see this kind of madness. Michigan, the University of Texas, the University of Arizona, Indiana. And as I saw this wildfire of hate spread, I could only think of a book that was written by Ariel Berger about Elie Wiesel called Witness. You know that Elie Wiesel taught at BU for many years. And Ariel Berger was his student, and also for many years. And in this book, he notes that Elie Wiesel's first intro lecture for all of his classes, he always made the following point. He always observed that Germany was so refined, so urbane, so civilized. German citizens, so urbane, so civilized. Germans, Professor Wiesel noted, they loved philosophy, they loved Goethe. They loved music, they loved Mozart and Beethoven. They were amazing parents to their children. They were amazing children to their parents. They were loving to their cats and to their dogs. Just one thing, these very refined and very urbane people somehow found a way to stigmatize and marginalize and demonize and discriminate against and murder Jews. And Elie Wiesel put it this way, that a madness descended on Germany. And I think about that for the madness that is descending on our campuses now. It is madness that students and faculty alike stigmatize and demonize and marginalize Israel and the people who support it. And you all know this, make no mistake. This is not an anti-war group. They're not anti-war. In fact, they shout things like bomb and burn Tel Aviv. They shout their allegiance to Hamas. They shout that the spirit of October 7th should live on. Last night at Northeastern, they were just clear and to the point, kill the Jews. Which is why, by the way, the administration, as of this morning, sent out a notice saying that we're calling in the authorities because that is hate speech that crosses the line, and that kind of hate will not be tolerated. But it's always there, and it's there in every campus, and it's madness that so many students and faculty do it, and it's especially madness and especially heartbreaking that there are so many Jews who are doing this, Jews who are turning on Israel, Jews who are turning on the Jewish people. I saw this with my own eyes. The day that Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, went to Columbia. He went to Columbia to deliver a simple message, that Jewish students at Columbia need to be safe and protected. Now, who could argue with this proposition? Jewish students at Columbia should be safe and protected. What's remotely controversial about this? By the way, Jewish students are like real people, like Jessica Weinfeld, who's here now, daughter of Mark and Pam, granddaughter of Beverly. Mikey, our Cantor and Lorena's son. Caleb Balsam, Edie and Lauren's daughter. We actually have Columbia students. And all Mike Johnson said was they should be safe. And yet, I watched Lester Holt that night. And an NBC correspondent interviews a woman who identifies herself as Jewish and a professor at Columbia. And she says, I couldn't disagree any more strongly with what Mike Johnson had to say. All the things that are being said at these encampments are protected free speech. Now, we're talking about cycles, so I just need to add the complexity you all know, which is these are schools we used to love, right? These are all schools that we used to love. Cycles, periods of love and closeness and intimacy, and cycles of like, oh my God, I don't even recognize it. So how do we understand the rough patches? How do we understand these ups and downs that characterize every marriage? Abraham and Sarah's marriage, all of our marriages. If you're married 60 plus years, you have ups and downs. That characterize every spiritual journey. That characterize our relationships with our alma maters. In fact, that characterize the American Jewish story. Where is wisdom to be found? So, wisdom is to be found in the last Mishnah of Brachot. It's a famous Mishnah because it is famously challenging. Here's the last Mishnah of Brachot, Brachot 9:5. Chayav Adam levarech et hara'ah kashem shehu mevarech al hatovah. A person is obligated to bless God for the bad, just as they're obligated to bless God for the good. Now, and that's the end of Brachot. Now, at first blush, this feels counterintuitive, if not impossible. How are Abe and Sarah, after all, supposed to bless God for their cognitive decline and where that's going to lead them? In the same way that they would bless God for all the good and healthy years when they were building their family and building their careers. How does that work? How do we, who once loved Columbia, bless Columbia? How do we, who once loved Harvard, bless Harvard? How do we, who once believed in American universities, how do we still bless them now that they are a toxic bastion of toxic hate? Whatever could this Mishnah mean? So I think this last Mishnah is getting at something so important. Don't miss this. If we could pick off a menu, nobody would pick October 7th. And nobody would pick the 7 months since October 7th. If we could pick off the menu, we'd pick something else. But guess what? There's no menu. And guess what? We can't pick. And guess what? We don't pick. There just is what it is. There just is what lands on us. And I think this Mishnah is saying something so important. You wouldn't have picked it. You'd always would have picked the happier chapter. You always would have picked the simpler chapter. Nobody would pick it. But it's here, and there is meaning and truth in every chapter. And it's our job to find it and grow it. We cannot give up on any chapter of our life. Life is just too precious. We can't just give up on this chapter of our life, however horrific it is. How do we operationalize this Mishnah? So it is said that when things are bad for Jews, it's good for Judaism. When things are bad for Jews, it's good for Judaism because we come together, and what you heard this morning, we get strength from each other, we give strength to each other. I've seen this with my own eyes in a couple of concrete ways, and quite recently. First Thursday morning, I saw this happen. We have a member named Shai Kavitsky, who is an Israeli, who lives here with his wife Alice. They have 2 young kids. After October 7th, Shai spent 3 months serving in Gaza, and when his service in Gaza was over, Shai was released from service, and he came back to Greater Boston. They live in Waltham, and he actually spoke here briefly on a Shabbos morning. Kids were running around, very happy, wonderful. On Wednesday, he marked his 35th birthday. Yesterday, Friday, he flew back to Israel because he was mobilized again by the IDF. They're going into Rafah. And in between his 35th birthday, which he spent packing up his green bag, and Friday, when he got on the El Al jet, he came to Minyan on Thursday. And we made a mishaberach for him. And everybody got up. And it was a big crowd that day at morning minyan. It starts at 6:45. These are people who really, really show up. And they show up early. And they got up. And they blessed him that he should go and do what he has to do and come home in peace to his wife and to his 2 young children. Our synagogue just has such an important role to play now. We wouldn't have picked it. If there was a menu, we wouldn't have picked it. But there's no menu. And this is what we got, and there is a meaning to be found here. So I want to tell you about a new role that I've been here a while. It's the first time I've seen this role for Temple Emmanuel. It's a new move. We didn't pick it. It got thrust on us. Did you know that Jewish artists and thinkers and Israeli artists and thinkers are being canceled in Greater Boston because they're Jewish and because they are Israeli? That is happening, and I'll give you 2 examples of it. The IAC, the Israeli American Council, reports that when they used to book events, no issue, they could book events. Now, when they try to book an event, the person on the other end says, yes, you want it for whatever the date is? Of course, no problem. By the way, what does IAC stand for? IAC is Israeli American Council. Excuse me, wait a minute. Awkward pause. The person gets back on the phone and says, I'm so sorry. We have a booking that date. We have a conflict. In fact, we have a conflict for every date. In fact, we have no space available for the IAC, the Israeli American Council. They come here. We'll take them every time, anytime. We'll take them in. Also, Jewish artists and Israeli artists are being canceled. A woman named Karen Taub, Israeli artist. She showed her stuff at a studio in Boston for several years running. Shira and I went several years running. Beautiful stuff, really thought-provoking stuff. At least the owner of the studio was honest. The owner of the studio calls her up. Hey, Karen, listen, if I show your stuff, I'll get canceled. If I show your stuff, your studio, my studio, will get canceled. We can't show your stuff. She's showing her stuff here on Yom HaAtzmaut. She was actually in Israel on October the 7th. And when she got back, she did 10 pieces of artwork, which accumulated in her basement because there was no place in Greater Boston to show them. But Temple Emmanuel is going to show them on Yom HaAtzmaut, and she's going to talk about it. She can't do it out there. She can do it in here. It's not a purpose. We would have picked off the menu, but we don't get to pick, and there is no menu. And so now, here's my question for you. What does this moment ask of us? All of us here have long, rich histories with Temple Emmanuel. And there have been periods where you were closer. And there have been periods where you've been farther away. That is the human condition, and that's the religious project. The question is, what's now? And the question is, what's next? And perhaps this can be a renewal moment. Perhaps this can be a moment where your relationship with this community is stronger than ever, more urgent than ever, more resonant than ever, more important than ever. Maybe this relationship with this synagogue will allow you to show up for our people and for our people's homeland in new ways that really matter at a historically important time. Write it down. Don't forget. Write it down. This chapter is really, really hard, but we can find a way to totally love it by getting through it together. Shabbat Shalom.